Welcome to Sustainable Futures with Daniela Bas on the first and the third Saturday every month at 10 a.m. Chess time. Join me for in-depth conversations, exclusive interviews and strategic insights with industry leaders, policymakers and innovators shaping our future. We'll explore how integrating social fairness enhances business and impacts sectors like fashion, food, tech, tourism, sports, and more towards sustainable social change. Every organization gets stronger by challenging itself, so do we. I know it from my own life experience as a woman with a disability who understands the power of resilience, communication, and of thinking out of the box, and as a female executive leader at global level on social sustainability and inclusion. Be inspired, learn, and gain insights. Tune in, think different, and act with purpose. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whichever part of the world you are. Today, my very special guest, is John Kemp. He is a trailblazing force in the world of disability rights, leading the Lakeshore Foundation since the year 2021, November, I think, 2021, when he championed, and in it, he champions health, fitness, and wellness for people with disabilities worldwide, which means it impacts also the well-being of everyone. And an award-winning advocate, John is a dynamic leader, and his leadership spans throughout the decades, including his transformative tenure at the Viscardi, allow me to say it in Italian, center, but then John can say it with the American pronunciation. And he is also the author of Disability Friendly, How to Make and Move from Clueless to Inclusive. And here in this book, John blends personal insights with the professional expertise, reshaping, therefore, the perception and policy in disability law, employment, and accessible technology. Hello, John. Welcome.
Hi, Daniela. It's great to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, I'm so eager to have this conversation with you. But before we start, John, this conversation, I would like our audience to know you a teeny bit better. Is that okay with you?
Certainly.
Lovely.
Go right
John,
ahead.
your journey from becoming a highly respected disability advocate and nonprofit leader to writing a powerful book, as I mentioned, on the experiences of persons with disabilities, to me, it's truly inspiring. So can you share some pivotal aha moments in your personal and professional life that really shaped your resilience and your success? And then I will ask you another question.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I've got to say it's a privilege to be with you, and thank you very much. Everybody feels like they have a book within them. Few of us ever get around to writing it. It took me many years to finally decide that I was going to put down on paper, so to speak, what I had learned throughout my life and how I'd gotten there. And I think I am privileged in a sense by starting my life with my disability. I'm the middle child of three. My dad was 32 when my mother died, 15 months after I was born and 3 months after my little sister was born. He raised three of us kids by himself, and with the help of a housekeeper who lived with us. But he was really tough. He was a tough guy. And he insisted that I go to regular schools, that my disability not interfere in any way with what every other kid was doing. All that sounds great, except trying to do it. And the hard part was we as people with disabilities don't always do things the same way and at the same speed and style as non-disabled individuals. So me trying to pass as a non-disabled person or keep up and thrive was a bit of a challenge, but it was also kind of what I needed. I had to figure out how to work around problems as a little kid, how to play on the playground, how to be the worst baseball player on when we were choosing sides, and learn how to live with the disappointment. For a long time I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player as a
Mhm.
little boy watching baseball. So my dad just pushed me, and when I came back from playground and school, and I said, I'm always picked last, and I'm not very good, and I think I want to be a professional baseball player. And he said, you just have to practice and practice and practice. And then sometimes if you realize that you're not the best and other people are better, you find something that you're really good at and you pursue that. So it was he never popped my balloon. He never said, no, you're never going to be a professional baseball player. But he guided me into, maybe I'm going to have to go to really pay attention to school. Maybe I'm going to have to go past secondary school. I'm going to have to go to college. I keep on going. I went to law school, and that's really one of the big lessons in my life was high expectations by my dad without my mom being around was very, very helpful to me. I didn't have with two parents, you always have the right of one appeal. If one says no, the other one, you can go to
Yeah,
the other one and try to convince the other person. But
right.
my dad was just smart. He was just really smart. And to all the parents who are listening to you in this podcast today, I want them to know that they should have high expectations for their children, because children will always try to aspire to achieve to the level that the parents expect them. Low
Without looking
expectations.
for perfectionism, though, right?
What's that?
To be the best of what you can be without looking
Yes,
to be perfect, because then,
that's right.
you know,
That's exactly right. It would be unrealistic and really unfair and probably hurtful to be my dad to expect me to be perfect.
yes.
And for me to think that I'm perfect, but he never wanted me to go low and feel badly and accept being second class and
Hmm.
doing this and that. So I think the notion that there were high expectations in my life right from the get-go. I had personal responsibilities as a kid, and I went off to college and had to learn how to take care of myself. I went 1,000 miles away from home to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and I had to learn how to get my artificial arms and legs on. I had to learn how to take a shower, brush my teeth, do all these things. I was doing them at home, but I always knew I had my dad close by, and I learned how to ask for help and get help in an appropriate way. And that's not easy for some people with disabilities. It's really hard to ask for help. So I'd say the lessons learned in my life started as a child with a disability. I'm one of the 13% of people in this world, in the disability world, who started their lives with their disabilities. So most people with disabilities acquire their disability after birth and
Hmm.
along life's journey, car accidents, illnesses, whatever it might be, and they have to learn how to go through this process.
Hmm.
That's why I say I feel fortunate that I started my life in this way, but there's no right way to go about it. So
So
that's just a
if
little
you
bit of
can,
an answer.
if you, and I thank you, but if you can share a lesson or two to those who are listening to us about overcoming obstacles and thriving. You already mentioned a couple now that very important, both in your in how can they overcome obstacles in their careers and also in their personal lives by being autonomous and independent as you did. What kind of lesson can you offer? Another one, if possible.
After graduating from law school, I started to practice law within the federal government, and I was an environmental lawyer, and I was expected to perform to the same level as everybody else, if not better. And these are standards that I put upon myself because of my childhood. I I had a great experience in my first job, and it was to be able to produce and to be able to demonstrate that as a disabled person, I could keep up, I could deliver, I could be a good environmental lawyer for the government and in enforcement, trying to protect the environment. And I think having success in my first encounter was probably a good lesson and a good opportunity. It gave me confidence that I needed to be able to go on in this world. I joined the board of directors as a volunteer of the National Easter Seal Society based in Chicago. And I was seeing the civil rights work that was going on in Congress, and while I was an environmental lawyer. And by being on the board of Easter Seals, I learned a couple of things. One was there was a whole service industry around helping people with disabilities who maybe didn't have as good a family as I had, or my dad was very middle class. He was a government worker, but I had the benefit of experiencing all the good things that he gave me, and I would say I just felt like I was fortunate to have an employer that allowed me to achieve. And so having some success along the way early helped me experience. And then with Easter Seals, I saw the executive director, the national executive director of this very large nonprofit made up of 150 affiliates all around the United States. And I kept thinking as I was working through my 6 years, my 2 3-year terms, that, someday maybe I could be an executive director of a national disability organization. And I watched her as kind of a role model, and I said, I can do that. I think I can do that someday. And so very subliminally, I was learning that I could do those things and maybe not always have to be a lawyer. I like being a lawyer, but that was special.
John, with all this incredible advocacy work you just mentioned, and you did and you do, let me ask you my jolly question. If you could create a superhero based on your life's journey, what would their superpower be, and what would their cape look like? Use your imagination. Boom, instinct.
I've met so many superheroes in the disability movement, and I'm talking to one right now in you. I think superheroes come in different packages, and I am really just so impressed with a lot of people in the disability rights movement. And I think sometimes some get suppressed or oppressed, and they don't let their true self shine. And if I could see someone who felt free and felt accepted and respected, like a Judy Human,
Yes, she was amazing.
amazing. And she was humble and confident. And if I could be a Judy Human, I would be happy. My cape would have a big smile, and it would be fearless and firm and forceful in my advocacy, and I would never stop and I would never give up in what I believe. So it
You know,
would be Judy's smile and Judy's courage and her fortitude. That's she was my superhero.
it really resonates with me, and I couldn't say more than what you said in terms of loving her. I met her the first time when I was 26 in Vienna, Austria, in Europe. And oh my gosh, she inspired me. I was just looking at her charisma, and there was so much energy and light around her. So it was a blessing for me too. John, now we move to a different kind of question, okay? No jolly questions any longer. But I would like to to know a little bit more about your leadership. You have navigated leadership roles in very complex organizations. You just mentioned a few from governments to nonprofit and so on. So from Lakeshore Foundation to the Viscardi, again, Italian pronunciation center. So what the challenges have you faced in promoting inclusive governance, and how can business ensure that fairness in decision making becomes deeply embedded in their strategies?
Well, I so respect this question that you're asking. I think that we have a long way to go still to this day about making sure that governance is inclusive of people with disabilities, and especially governance of organizations who serve people with disabilities. And the nothing about us without us, or maybe we say it now, nothing without us, is appropriate here. Um, my leadership style has always been to be inclusive. I can control in leading a nonprofit what happens with the staff. I can suggest strongly to the board of directors that if we're serving people with disabilities, we have to have people with disabilities on the board of directors. And that has been the case, and we've always had and added people, qualified people with disabilities, who can help the organization in a much broader way than just disability. We need the disability voice, and we need an authentic disabled person. We don't need a disabled person who doesn't know anything about the disability rights movement on the board of directors for tokenism. That I don't want. I want someone who understands who we are and what our needs are. But I also want that person to understand finance, program operations, what it takes to be profitable.
A
How do you
profession.
how do you how do you exactly how to cut costs when you have to cut costs? I mean, it's hard sometimes. Sometimes you have to depersonalize the relationships. I recently wrote an article for the National Association of Corporate Directors Organizations magazine directorship, and I call for the inclusion of qualified people with disabilities on corporate boards of directors across the United States and around the world. And I think it's high time that we be respected enough to be included in the, say, the applicant pool of people who are trying to become and want to become and serve as directors of private and public corporations. It's high time that we participate, and that there's equity involved, and that we can have a piece of the action, and that we can have the economic freedom that we all want. So if anybody wants to check out that article, please do. But the philosophy is that you have to have representation of people with disabilities, who are qualified people with disabilities, in the governance role to have an effective organization. That's what I have learned.
John, as a Lakeshore Foundation um, president, I know that this foundation serves as a Paralympic training site at home to the United Nations, sorry, the United States Wheelchair Rugby Association. So, how do you see sports as a vehicle for promoting fairness, inclusion, equity, and social sustainability? You know, the sport is one of the areas I keep championing, even after having left the United Nations. That was the mandate I got from the UN back 1.5 years ago for a few years at global level. So I really feel very close to sports as a vehicle to promote what I just said, and also development and peace.
Well, it gives me an opportunity to say thank you for your service to the United Nations. You had a tremendous impact when I was working at the Viscardi Center, said in an English way. I knew of you. I read about you. We had a brief opportunity to meet once, and your contributions were and remain profound. So you are an inclusive leader, and that's really important. It's important for all of us to see that the United Nations had you in that position. The the role of sport, I think, has become more respected, and especially para sport or disability sport. It used to be kind of cute, 20, 30 years ago. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice that those poor disabled people
Yeah.
get a chance to do a little something here and there? And it's like, no, today, and then for the last 10 years or so, I think we've all of society has grown to respect athletes with disabilities as real athletes. They put in the time, they put in the effort, the commitment to really participate at the highest levels.
And the
And
media
I think
coverage is amazing nowadays,
it's
finally.
it was it's finally gotten there, and it's still going to grow. And
Yes.
in fact, some of the corporate sponsors of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee have chosen to just go with the Paralympic side of the Olympic and Paralympic movement because it is so, I hate to say the word inspirational, but it's powerful in that people can achieve whatever they want if they will try hard enough and be honest with themselves. I'll never be a pro baseball player if I practiced every day of my life as a kid. But these are serious athletes, and they are unbelievably talented. And when I see them come here, here I am in Birmingham, Alabama, home to two national governing bodies for wheelchair for disability sport. One is wheelchair rugby that took silver at the Paris Paralympics, and the other is boccia, U.S. and or as we call here in the United States, bocce ball, but boccia. And so we're home to two of these teams. What I have learned, and to answer your question, is that these are as disciplined a people about their sport as any employee could be and should be, or as any person serving in the military is and is taught to be. They are committed, they are focused, they're well trained, they're given the tools they need to do it, and they make the personal sacrifice instead of having three glasses of wine and eating a pizza at night. They are eating celery and drinking lots of water, and they're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they're working out. That's what I have learned is these are serious athletes who would make incredible employees because they have learned the discipline it takes to be great. So I think there's a lot to learn from not only military folks who served in militaries around the world, but also people with disabilities who are in serious competitive athletics. These are disciplined people who have learned all about their sport and themselves and have improved themselves to the level of the highest performance possible.
So indeed, the sport promotes fairness, inclusion, and also it's socially sustainable from what you just said. But what role do you think adaptive sports play in shaping business policies around diversity and inclusion?
Well, just to drop back for just a second, I'll say we have men and women on our wheelchair rugby team.
Mhm.
And one of our starters is Sarah Adam from St. Louis, Missouri, and a wheelchair user and has a health condition that on some days she has lots of strength and power, and on other days she does not. And we take her exactly as she presents herself. She'll wake up some morning and say, I don't have it today. I don't have the strength today. I can't start today. But all the guys and the ladies play side by side, and they respect each other's strengths and they know each other's weaknesses. So that really helps. Hopefully, answers some of the equity issues that you were raising before. I think business can have fun and learn great lessons by engaging with the disability sport community wherever they are. We have guest rugby wheelchairs, and we invite companies to come and not play our team, but for their management, their leadership team, their executives, or their boards of directors to come and play against each other. Somebody teaches them the rules. They get out there in their guest manual wheelchairs for rugby, and they play as teams against each other. And so all of a sudden, the CEO doesn't get to call all the shots. It's the best player who knows how to navigate their chair and get through the wickets and get across the line. That's the best player. So they learn how to play as teams, and I think what they can learn, and in a fun way, is use sport to build teamwork and equity among themselves. And I think that's a really fun opportunity. I see it almost every day. We have companies in the Birmingham area and others from Atlanta and other places who come over here to do this exercise and then spend time talking about it and then talking about the business that they're in. And we give them the space. They can go off by themselves. They can have their own private meetings. But they've just gone through something that was very, very democratizing. Became very equal. They're all on the same level. So it's a delightful way to think creatively about how to use sport in business.
So they learn by doing, these business people, and then when you go back to their companies, it will come slowly, automatic and normal for them to implement internal governance policies around the diversity and inclusion, because by having understood what it is all about, it will be easier then to shape business policies in favor of inclusion. This is a very good example. Thank you. Now, let's talk
You're
about
welcome.
governance. What's one surprising but fun policy you have seen work in building a more fair and inclusive culture? And how can businesses steal this good practice to scale up their own efforts, in your view?
Well, I might go back to the last answer and say that's not a bad one. Really participating in disability sport might strengthen their governance role. But I think it's broader than disability. And if we have appropriate representation from all interested groups, I think we tend to surprise ourselves and become very pleasantly rewarded by seeing life from different perspectives. I learned so much from my friends who are people of color and the lives they've lived and how they got to the successful point they are at in their lives. Um, how people dealt with poverty, how people dealt with blatant discrimination, and overcame it, so to speak, or learned to live with it. And when you've been subjected to this stuff, you develop an empathy for people who are still coming through the process, and you educate them about you have to let some things go, and some things you have to take a stand on. And that's a fine line. You've got to decide what you're going to throw down and say, you can't talk to me like that anymore. I'm not going to let you do that. But I'd say my best lesson that I've learned is the more diverse representation we have in governance, the better our organization operates and serves people.
I couldn't agree more. To bake a good cake, we need many different ingredients. So, what's the one hard truth about corporate governance that no one wants to admit when it comes to fairness and inclusion, in your view? And how can businesses radically rethink their policies to create a lasting impact on the social dimension of sustainability, on the top of what you already suggested?
Disabled people are not children all their lives. They actually grow up and have skills and abilities that contribute. And they have to get rid of, other people have to get rid of the stereotypes and misconceptions that they have about people with disabilities in order to see them fairly and equally. And that's really hard for a lot of people who never went to grade school and high school and college with people with disabilities. Or if they did, it was only that one kid that was going through that process. Today in the United States, thanks to the Education of All Handicapped Children's Act, or Individuals with Disabilities Act, which changed its name, we now have a second and even sometimes a third generation starting into schools of kids with disabilities who are sitting side by side with non-disabled individuals, and it becomes a normal thing, kind of like our rugby players see women and men. Our school systems today are contributing greatly to the future inclusion of people with disabilities. And what we're seeing now with the post-ADA graduates and IDEA graduates out in the community is when they don't see people with disabilities included, they say something about it. They recognize that we're missing. And it's completely opposite of where we were 30, 40 years ago, which was we don't want any disabled people in here, and we're elitists, and we should only we get to go to school and college and law school and all that. Today it's like, why aren't people with disabilities sitting in the classroom or in jobs with me? So to all the HR folks that are listening, to the diversity and inclusion folks who are listening, your younger employees will know right away if you're being fair and equitable in the way you're providing employment opportunities and advancement opportunities to your staff. They will recognize it. So get ready. These young folks today are tuned in to disabled people being fully accepted in the workplace, and that's a wonderful, wonderful future to me.
There is still a long way, as you said, but many steps have been taken. I recall, now I'm 63. I recall when I was 6 years old, I became paraplegic, and I was starting primary school. In those years in Italy, we didn't have the law that allowed the children with the disabilities, be that they had sensory, mental, or physical disabilities, to attend the standard ordinary schools. They had to go to special schools. I was very lucky. It's a long story, but with the support of the dean of the school and my parents, I could attend so-called normal school in those years. And in 3 years later, in 1970, 1960, 1970 or something like that, finally in Italy the law passed, so that since then children with and without disabilities attend the very same school, and if they needed some support and assistance, then it is provided. So I agree with you. It's that way to move and to proceed in order to reach the equity we have been talking about before. Now, since I just mentioned my age
Daniela,
when I was 16, yes,
I just want to say, you remind me of something that I want to just comment on, because
please.
who benefits from inclusion? Who benefits? We always think it's us, you and me,
Mm-mm.
benefit by getting to go to school. But all those other kids in school grow up and get out into the world, and they are changed human beings. I can tell just by my knowing you that you had a tremendous impact on other individuals. And when we think about who benefits from inclusion, everyone does. And that's what I think companies sometimes miss. They miss that moment, that educational opportunity to realize they're helping their company by including people with disabilities at all levels of the organization. Okay, I'm sorry. Go
No,
right
no, no,
ahead.
no. This is a conversation, and I couldn't agree more. If you think also of children who later on might, growing up, might face a temporary disability, for instance, or someone in their families or a friend, but they have seen when they were younger someone who was dealing with it in a resilient, very resilient way, and looking at the abilities, utilizing and using at the best the abilities they had and live a decent, very exciting life. And that's an incredible example where others are learning by looking at those who have a disability, how you can face it and actually run a very interesting life. It doesn't matter what. Now we go to the past now, and I usually say, once upon a time. The Lakeshore Foundation was established to continue to advance in disability inclusion and advocacy at a global scale. Now, the question: what initiatives or partnerships have you found particularly impactful in promoting awareness and inclusion worldwide, John?
I think the first phase is usually other like-minded people and organizations serving people with disabilities. The really interesting partnerships are with complementary and different organizations who have overall the same goal of fairness and sustainability over a lifetime, and that how to change human behaviors. So it might be working with environmental groups, and it might be working with the oil industry, and it might be, yesterday I was at the Coca-Cola headquarters in Atlanta, and they somehow have gotten religion, so to speak, over disability. They've somehow discovered that people with disabilities can help them in their accomplishing their profitability and their success. I was like, well, great. I mean, I was there just to talk and listen and learn, but I'm always kind of amazed that people somehow all of a sudden the light goes on, they reach that tipping point and they tip to the positive, and they realize we have been ignoring and forgetting about people with disabilities and how they can help us. They have a whole area now that they've created about assistive devices on how to get their caps off their bottles and their cans opened of all the different juice drinks and beverage drinks that they have all around the world. And they've created assistive technologies that help everybody, not just people with disabilities, but it's starting to reach out. So what I have learned is we partner with people who are not necessarily like us, and that they learn so much from us. And then we in turn learn what drives their business, and we benefit as well. So it's going to the unexpected and the different from our own that we learn more. And together we get a lot more done.
So, currently, what tips can you share about other successful practices from industries you just mentioned, now Coca-Cola, that hire individuals with the disabilities in top positions? And this can then be an example for other organizations to adopt similar successful practices to improve their diversity and inclusion efforts.
Well, two thoughts at least come to mind very quickly. And the first one is reasonable accommodations, as they're called in the American law, or reasonable adjustments. Somebody wrote a job description and says this job has to be performed this way with these skills that you have to perform them. And accommodations require a restructuring of that job for a person with a disability. What I have found is that reasonable accommodations or work adjustments apply to all people with and without disabilities at all levels of the corporation or the employer and government. Everybody is better off by having the ability to ask for and receive reasonable modifications to the way their job is performed. They're hired for their skill and their talent, and that cannot be compromised. But in how you get something done, that can be changed any which way an employer can decide to do it. So I think the first step is to think more broadly about how workplace modifications apply and benefit everybody. It's not just disabled people, it's everybody. If somebody's you got morning people that like to get up at 5 o'clock, and they're basically done by 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and they've worked a whole day, and their internal clock starts earlier than my internal clock, which starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and ends about 6 o'clock at night. So some people are morning, some people are evening people. Can your workforce adjust to that? So that's just one little example.
Hmm. Yeah, and then
Um,
having some 4 hours in common, of course. Otherwise, it's difficult to communicate. But
right,
I see that point. Yeah.
right. If you have internal customers that are relying upon you during a certain core period of time, you've got to
Hmm.
be present. And that's the other thing about remote work.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about how nice it is to have, live in Italy and work in the United States. Do your work for the benefit of a company in the United States. Who wouldn't want that? Everybody wants to live in Italy. Everybody does. So, but if you've got internal customers, other people
Hmm.
in the company that
Hmm.
need your presence there, it doesn't work to be remote. It
Hmm.
just so it has to be a job requirement.
As you said, we have to accommodate reasonable accommodation. It has to be reasonable, but there must be the accommodation as well. Sorry, the second example you wanted to share?
Yes, that there are multiple intelligences. People have multiple intelligences, and there is not necessarily a hierarchy, that everybody has different ways in which they go about thinking and solving problems. And I think about people who are on the autism spectrum, and I think about the fact that there are people with Asperger's who are extremely quick and able to see patterns, and they're hired for that skill and they can recognize various things. And other people on the spectrum who have a great deal of difficulty in socializing and aren't necessarily easily included socially in a lot of activities of an enterprise. But it doesn't mean that they don't have something to offer. People who have intellectual disabilities, we're finding out, have incredible skills and abilities. And we just only think of them in a certain way, and that they only behave in a certain way, and they only have the ability to solve certain problems and work. And it's kind of like shame on us, folks, who put them in a box and have low expectations for them. So I think about people who have multiple intelligences, this wide span of ways. And it's up to us as employers and leaders to figure out how to unlock people, how to help them be as productive as they possibly can, remove the stuff that doesn't affect them being successful in what they want to do, and have them do work that fulfills their own personal needs. That's what comes to mind when I think about what's next. It's on us. It's on all of us who are leaders and employers about thinking about multiple intelligences. Everybody is equal in many ways, and many more ways than we think of them now. And we've got to find the way to communicate with them and unlock them.
I like it. I mean, this applies to everyone,
Everyone,
right? So
right? Am I am
disability
I, am I
disappears.
doing what I right? Am I doing everything that I can? Am I in the right groove? Am I right in the right vertical that allows me
Yeah.
to be the best I can be? I think I am, but
Am I
maybe I would have been
am I
better
using
somewhere
the
else.
right skills I have for the job I like or I can perform? That's it. So disability or not, who cares? We look at the
Right,
abilities, right?
right. And so we've got to give people a lot of opportunities to try a lot of different things and fail.
Hmm.
And fail sometimes. It's okay to fail. You just don't do it two or three times in a row. But if you fail and you realize that this isn't for me, I'm not going to be good at this. I'm not going to be a professional baseball player. Okay, I got that. But there could be 100 other things or 1,000 other things that you'll be great at. So we've just got to give people lots of opportunities to try.
So before concluding our conversation, let's fly to the future for a moment. Since this podcast looks at sustainable futures. So if you were 20 years old in the year 2071, this is a question I ask to all my guests. What inclusive and sustainable future would you envision for individuals with and without disabilities in leadership positions?
Wow, that's a tough question. This is where I get to dream a bit.
Please.
I I think a lot of us folks with disabilities are still underlooked and overlooked. Low expectations. I would hope by 2071 that inclusion is embedded in the very fabric of our society in all areas, and that disability isn't an unusual thing. It is just part of life, and that creativity and innovation thrives with our input and our perspective as people with disabilities, but to solve bigger problems because we bring certain skills to it. I think by 2071, there will be a lot of advances in technology that enable people to overcome issues of, say, I wear prostheses, I wear artificial arms and legs. Uh, Things will be embedded in our bodies. They're now talking about the whole issue of the brain and how we can embed things in our brain. It gets a little scary and a little ethically
Yeah.
questionable as to how far we go with these kinds of things. But I think we have to be open to new ways of doing business, new ways of socializing, new ways of living. And I would hope that our built environment and our technological environments are completely free of barriers that exist today, that steps are removed in any new construction, or that there's a workaround for the incredible historic buildings in Europe primarily and throughout the world, but that technology enables everyone to have an equal opportunity to grow and flourish and thrive. So I hope by 2071, all of these things are embedded in our lives, and we don't have to have workarounds and make do's and accommodations, that they're already included in what's anticipated. That would be a great life.
Oh, yeah. So persons in leadership positions in 50 years from now to make the best they can, also thanks to the technologies we have available nowadays and in the future. Who knows what technologies we're going to see. Keeping in mind, though, allow me to add just a personal touch here, um, that it has to be for the well-being of people and the planet, not becoming slaves of machines. That's my hope.
No, that
Sorry,
I'm
I did a
glad.
personal touch.
No, I completely agree with you. I think greed sometimes pushes us into areas where we shouldn't be, and they ignore the serious damage that we're doing to our planet uh, and to humanity. And I think we've got to be very careful about having the discipline to say no. We're not going to do that because it is damaging permanently the quality of our environment. I think these are not isolated issues. These are integrated issues that we have to look at very carefully. So I completely agree with you, Daniela.
Thank you. Now, wrapping up this delightful conversation, if you could ask yourself a question, which question would you ask yourself, and what would be your answer to your own question, John?
What makes me happy? And what makes me happy is my wife, who is just an incredible human being, really smart and really challenging, and is not not a pushover. And we just enjoy this incredible equity in our lives, and that laughing and enjoying life and feeling secure and trusting and loving is lifts my soul. It allows me to come and help people here who are having difficulties, but also to encourage people to go as far as they can. Some people stop themselves.
Mm.
So I think about what makes me happy, and what I'm happy about my wife, our kids, our 5 grandsons, my sisters and their families. So, but I'm also happy when I see people succeed in life and achieve a level of happiness and contentment, and that we don't live in a world of fear and controversy. I think we owe it to ourselves to try to achieve to that level of humanity. That would make me happy.
Can I ask you the very last question? In your view, where the disability movement is headed to? Uh,
The disability movement is always changing, and we are getting smarter as we move forward, and we're learning more about different disabilities or conditions, and we're trying to understand as many new and different things that we didn't understand 5 years ago. And look at autism in the last 25, 30 years. It's just exploded. And what's the cause, and how do we prevent that from happening? But when someone lives with a disability like autism, how do they live a great life? How do they enjoy life? How do they have all the benefits and opportunities? So, I think the disability movement will morph tremendously. The best thing I can think about is that all these national organizations that serve people and corporations will include people with disabilities in them, and they will infuse disability awareness and understanding in all of these non-disability serving associations and companies, and that will be fully integrated. Will there always need to be someone who will be an advocate for people with disabilities? Probably, but it's going to be a different kind of an advocacy than it is now.
So with Answer, you have made the smile many, many more people and gave happiness to others as well. Thank you so much, John, for having shared also, something about your personal life. It's very inspiring, extremely important, and also the energy and the tips and the advice you have provided by sharing your professional expertise and how we could make things become more socially sustainable and also promoting social justice and equity. Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's a privilege to be with you, Daniela.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
As I wrap up this episode, my heartfelt gratitude to today's guest and to all of you. Join me for the next episode as we delve deeper with special guests, uncovering thought-provoking insights and actionable steps, paving the way for a brighter, inclusive, sustainable tomorrow. Thanks also to Damian Morton, music, and Maria Cortez Gagliano, social media. Don't miss out next episode on shaping the future we aspire to. Ciao, ciao!